Welcome back to the Rebel Tribe podcast. This one's going to be fun. I have to admit, when I first saw, well, I'll just let this kind of speak for itself. So today's guest is Lindsay Reeves, the owner of Home Safe Mold Inspectors, and the human partner of someone pretty unique, and that's what caught my eye and reached out. Hope the mold dog. I have to admit, I had no idea what that was. So I was like, what is a mold dog? I need to know. Well, it seems if you've ever dealt with like mysterious health issues in your home or strange smells you can't quite place, or just kind of wondered what might be hiding behind your walls, mold might be part of the story. And Lindsay helps people uncover problems they didn't even know that were there. And Hope, her trained mold detection dog, can literally sniff out toxic mold inside homes. Now, how cool is that? So today we're going to talk about mold and health and homes and the fascinating work of mold detection. And I don't know, do we get to meet Hope, Lindsay?
I can try to get her in here a little bit, but she might take over. She has a pretty big personality.
Well, then let's save her for the end.
Okay, okay.
I have to ask, how in the world did you come up with like the mold inspection business, and how did a mold detection dog even become part of the team?
Yeah, absolutely. So I joke and I say that mold inspector was never on my bingo card. I have an accounting degree and I did mortgage lending for years, and my husband was in technology sales. And so inspection was never on our, list of ambitions for life. But unfortunately, our family lived through a toxic mold exposure. We lived in a house that we had no idea had hidden mold. And it took us several years of just very, very extreme health issues to get to the place where we realized it was our house that was killing us. And so because of that, it wound up causing us to become very vocal about mold and all of the symptoms it can cause, because we were just shocked that it could do all of the things. Almost no one in our house had overlapping symptoms. We all had very unique and personalized symptoms that ranged from neurological issues to, rashes and bronchitis that you kind of think of mold, all the way to gut issues. I was walking into walls. I was a zombie by the end of it. And so it took us years to figure it out, and we didn't want other families to go through that. So we started sharing our story. And eventually, that just became us being like, hey, we need, mold inspectors that will go in and really do deep investigations in houses, because the standard is to come in, do air samples, be there for maybe an hour, do a very brief visual inspection, and really rely heavily on air samples. And unfortunately, air samples are very flawed. They're wrong more than they're right. And so we were, just at a point where we're like, you know what? This is a void that needs to be filled, and we're gonna fill the void. And so we started our mold inspection business, and we had already always known about mold dogs. Bill Whitstein has been training mold dogs for 30 plus years down in Florida. And so we always knew they were a thing, and we are big dog people. We love dogs. And so we always thought it would be something that we would add if we ever did the inspection business. And so once we started the inspection business, it was just natural to add her on, because she can really help us find things that we can't find with just the visible eye, or, history on the house, because sometimes everything looks perfect, but there could be something hiding that we just can't see, but she can smell it. So that's why we added her on.
So what exactly do you do? What exactly does a well, what does Home Safe Mold Inspectors do?
Yeah. So we do multi-hour investigative style mold inspections, which means my husband, myself, and Hope go to the house. My husband does a full interior, exterior, attic to crawl space inspection. I say he looks at everything he can look at, minus crawling on your roof. He's not climbing on your roof, but if he can get access to it, he's going to be looking at it. It's usually anywhere from 4.5 to 7.5 hours, depending on the size of the house and the complexity of it. And so he's going to be, looking, starting on the outside of the house. Hope and I start on the inside. there's a lot of things we can tell just by walking around the outside of the house where there could be weak spots inside. And so we're looking for things like the grading, and are there gutters, and does it look like water's been pooling in a certain area, or is there staining on the outside of the brick? Are there vines growing up the house, because that can hold moisture up against the house and block the sun. And so we're looking for all of that kind of stuff on the outside. And then I take her on the inside and she tags, she sits. So that's her tail is when she smells mold, she sits. And I joke because she's a 12-pound Jack Russell. And so she sits for about 2 seconds, and then she jumps up and down in the air like, Mommy, I found it, I found it, I found it. And so she gets really excited. And I put blue tape anywhere she smells mold. And then when Blake comes inside, he does a full infrared scan on the house, and he starts going through just room by room, piece by piece, looking at all of the different areas of the house. And then he makes sure to add anything that Hope tags to his inspection. A lot of what they do overlaps. So Blake is already going to look at the kitchen sink, for example, in great detail because it's a prime area where we find mold. But Hope tags a lot of kitchen sinks because disposals and gaskets and drains have mold. And so a lot of what they do is overlap, but then there's always those areas where she tags where we're just like, you know what, never in a million years would we have known to drill a hole in that wall, so that's where she really comes in handy.
So what are some of the common problems that you find? I just heard you talk about garbage disposals, and yeah, mine sometimes does not have the most pleasant odor, and I clean it. I mean, I clean it because I'm just that kind of freaky person. It's like, ew.
Yeah, they're pretty gross.
So what are some of the common problems you find?
Yeah, so garbage disposals and drains are just some of those issues in the house. Gaskets, front load washing machines, dishwasher gaskets. Those are things that you just have to clean on a regular basis. They're going to get nasty because they have water and stuff going through them often. And so those are things that you're just going to have to clean and stay on top of. But the bigger areas are things where water has gotten, into sheetrock or into wood or cabinetry, in insulation, into your sheathing. And so that's where we find, what they call the water damage molds that are typically the toxic molds. And so, some areas we find a lot of issues, kitchen sinks. And it's not usually the disposal that's the big problem. It's a drip, drip, drip slowly in the back. And people don't know because they've got all of their products back there. And so they have no idea. It's been slowly leaking for 6 months. So we find a lot of issues in kitchen sinks where dishwashers have leaked behind the cabinetry and they didn't know it. Water heater closets are a really prime area to find issues because they're out of sight, out of mind. People just don't go check their water heater closets very often. Old chimneys, skylights, we'll find a lot of issues around old skylights or chimneys because the flashing breaks down. Tile showers are a pretty big one. We just say tile showers are made to fail. They almost eventually always fail, unfortunately. I joke and say I'd like to find the person who back in the 70s or 80s or whenever, is like, hey, we should build tile showers and put grout down here in an area that has a ton of water, because that doesn't make any sense to me, but that's what they did, because they're always going to have problems eventually. And so tile showers eventually usually will break down. So we'll find a lot of mold there. Any water source that, has an opportunity to leak. But then, there's hidden areas too where roofs leak, or we'll find areas where exhaust fans are vented into the attic and they're just blowing hot, humid air into a part of the attic and growing mold up there. So there's a lot of opportunities, unfortunately, for mold to be in our house. But it all usually comes either from water damage of some sort, leaks, flooding, whatever, or high humidity. A lot of people don't realize that there are certain species that only need humidity to grow. A lot of people think molds need a ton of water, but there's one side of the molds that don't need a lot of water. And then there's another group of molds that need a ton of water. but we don't want any of them. So even some of the molds that are there for high humidity can be very dangerous.
So what are some signs that, mold might be present? What are some things we might look for that we would normally not pay any attention to?
So, things that we're looking for is obviously the history on the house. And so, we talk in great detail with customers before we ever book an inspection. And we go through a very long list of questions about the homes. So if it's on a crawl space and the crawl space is dirt underneath, that's almost guaranteed to have mold. And whatever air is in that crawl space will be in your breathing zone through the stack effect. And so that's one of those things that they tell us, they've got a house that's on a dirt crawl space that was built in, 1975. We're like, okay, you don't have to tell me anything else. You need an inspection. But there's a lot of questions that we ask, the history on the house, the history of any water damage. But then, how's the family? Is there anyone sick? Are there people in the house that have a lot of random unexplained health issues and they just can't seem to get past it? That it just keeps recurring. That's a pretty good telltale sign that something could be happening in the house. There are, smells of some molds. And so if you have that musty, earthy, basement smell, that's mold. Basements are not supposed to smell that way. So just know that, which that was a telltale sign in the house that almost killed us. And we didn't know. We just thought that smell was normal. You can also, if you see staining on ceilings, that's because water has usually come through from a roof leak or, something like that. We're also looking for cracking, peeling, bubbling, warping, bowing, bulging, rust. Rust is a pretty telltale sign that water's been there. So there's a lot of different signs and symptoms that people can look for in their house. And we have those listed on our Facebook page and on our website so people can kind of go through those and kind of do an assessment. Another good thing they can do is check the back of their toilet tank. So if they open the back of that tank and look under the lid, if it's black underneath that and there's mold at that water line or above, that's a pretty good indication that there's mold somewhere in the house. Our HVAC registers can also tell us. Sometimes, if they're dark and dusty and look like they have something kind of coming out of them, that's a red flag as well. So there's several things that people can be doing to check, their own homes on a regular basis. And we would definitely recommend people be inspecting their houses regularly.
I'm going through my whole house. I'm thinking, yeah, the history of my house. Okay. Yeah, okay.
It can be overwhelming, but the good thing is, we tell people mold is very fixable. It's very fixable. I mean, sometimes it's a pain, sometimes it's expensive, but you want to fix it before it affects your health. Because health is way more expensive to fix.
Yeah, and like you said, all the things you were listing, half this house we found it was vacant for quite a bit actually before we actually bought it.
Yeah.
There was some issues that I did not even think about at the time, but now that I'm listening to you, I'm like, oh my gosh, okay.
I know. Well, you only know what you know when you know, right? So looking back now, the house that almost killed us, we would have known, like if we went there today and we could go back in time, we would walk through that house and we would know immediately it was a problem. But we didn't know then. We had no idea. So
when people hear toxic mold, they don't even know what that actually means. So what are we really talking about?
Yeah, so there are over 100,000 mold species in the world that they know of, probably way more that they don't even know of yet. There are different categories of mold. Molds can be allergenic, pathogenic, and toxigenic. And so when they talk about toxic molds, it is the group of molds that are known to produce mycotoxins. So those mycotoxins are the poisons that those molds put off into the air that make us and animals and, everyone sick. It is their defense mechanism, basically. So mold can't get up and run away. It can't punch you in the face. It has no way to fight. but it has a will to survive like none other. It has been around forever and it will be around forever, and it has a very high survival rate. And so the way it defends itself from any kind of invader is those mycotoxins. And so it will put those off if another mold tries to move into its territory, or if it feels threatened because we spray some kind of a chemical on it, or we get too close to it. It will put out those mycotoxins. And so that's what people are talking about when they're talking about toxic mold. So they generally are thinking about Stachybotrys, which is what people really think of as the toxic black mold. That's Stachybotrys. But there's a lot of toxic molds, Chaetomium, Aspergillus. There's several that produce mycotoxins.
So what kind of health problems can they cause?
So Stachybotrys and Chaetomium in particular are severe neurotoxins. So they can cause a crazy range of symptoms, from memory loss, anxiety, depression, people not being able to use their muscles well, like people even being bedridden, dementia type symptoms, MS type symptoms, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's type symptoms. When we were in the house, we had Stachybotrys, Chaetomium, and Aspergillus, and by the end of it, I couldn't complete a sentence. I would try to say one word and I would say something else. And at that time, I was in my like early 30s, mid 30s. And so I was barely functioning as a human being. I mean, it was awful. But we talk to people who have like seizures. We've had 3 kids who were in wheelchairs and couldn't walk because of mold exposure. And all 3 of those kids got out of their wheelchairs within weeks of remediating their house. So the symptoms can be just about anything and everything. You know, we tell people that mold doesn't necessarily cause every single symptom. It does cause a lot of symptoms, but it also allows a lot of things. So it causes so much inflammation and chaos in our body, and it breaks down our immune system, and it takes away all of our like nutrient stores, and causes our body to be able to be so weak that other things can then come in that maybe our body was able to keep at bay for a long time, like Lyme disease, stuff like that. And so it can be pretty dangerous. It's very severe in some cases.
Have you seen that? Have you seen situations where people were dealing with health issues maybe for years before discovering that they had mold in their homes?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I would say that is most often the case. I would say that's the norm, honestly. We went to dozens of doctors. We took myself and our kids to specialists after specialists. No one mentioned mold, not a single time. They were just like, here's a pill, here's a cream, here's a steroid, here's an inhaler, all the things, an antibiotic. And they never mentioned mold. They never mentioned environment at all. And so we see that happens very, very often. I think that honestly, by the time most people get to us, that has been their experience, because a lot of our customers are coming to us from functional doctors or holistic type doctors. And it's because they have exhausted all of the other resources in the, regular medical community and did not get answers. And so we do have a lot of people that come to us after years of being sick, unfortunately. Now, there are certain people that figure it out really quickly, which is amazing and wonderful. It's starting to be more well known. And so the word is kind of out a little bit now. And so people are figuring it out quicker. I think a lot in part to social media and podcasts like this, people are starting to learn. But there's still a lot of people that are suffering and they have no idea it's their house, because they give them a lot of diagnoses. They give them a lot of names. They give them a lot of labels. And so people think that getting that label, that diagnosis of fibromyalgia or rheumatoid arthritis or POTS or PANDAS or whatever, they think, okay, well, that's what it is. But doctors don't tell them, okay, well, now let's figure out why you have this, group of symptoms. They don't keep going until you usually get to like a functional type doctor.
Are certain homes or climates more vulnerable to mold problems?
Yes, so homes in like Florida, South Texas, Louisiana, in those super hot, humid climates are definitely going to have more issues. And there's certain places, South Florida, for example, where our dog trainer lives. He lives in Tampa, and he just tells us, he goes, we will remediate on a regular basis. Like it's just life down here. There's so much humidity, you're just constantly having to remediate areas of your house. And so there are definitely climates that are worse than others, but even dry areas like, desert type areas, cold areas up north, they still have mold issues just because our houses have a lot of water in them nowadays. We try to build them very airtight, and we have a lot of complicated flooring plans and roof lines, and we like, 7 bathrooms in the house or whatever. And so that's a lot of piping that goes through a house. So there's just a lot of opportunity for leaks, unfortunately.
Well, what are some of the, I don't know, biggest misconceptions people have about mold?
So I'd say one of the biggest is mold doesn't affect me. We hear that a lot from people. There's a lot of people that think that they are not genetically susceptible to it. There's a lot of people that think that 25% of the population are affected, and the other 75% of the population just don't have to worry about it because they don't carry a specific like MTHFR gene. But the truth is, if you're exposed to a toxin long enough, it doesn't matter your genetics. Eventually, you'll get sick. So there's people that definitely get sicker quicker. We have those canaries in the coal mine who are genetically more susceptible, and they will get sicker usually before anyone else in the house. But eventually, everyone in the house is going to get sick. And so we'll get phone calls, and we'll be talking to them, and a lot of times the father will be like, well, I'm not sick, everybody in the house is sick, but I'm not sick. And when we get in there, if we find a severe issue, we'll just tell them, well, let us know in 6 months how you're feeling, because I bet you are sick and you don't know it. And so a lot of times we'll talk to the dad 6 or 8 months later after remediation is finished, and he'll be like, you know what, I was sick, I didn't even realize it. So I think at some point everyone will get sick if they're exposed to the right amount of mold long enough. It just depends on your genetics on how quickly that will happen. But I don't think that there's anyone who is immune to it at all, and I think that's a big misconception.
So can I just like, well, you go to the store, you see these, you were talking about the showers, you see the mold and mildew cleaners for your shower. Can I just like spray it with bleach or something and get rid of it?
No, so like I said, mold has a will to survive like none other. And so if you try to spray it with bleach or something like a chemical, it's going to react. It's going to put off its mycotoxins, so it can make it worse. Bleach is great at taking the color off of the surface of something, but it can't do anything to the mold colony behind it or underneath it. So, for example, let's say sheetrock. By the time you see the mold on this side of the sheetrock, there are millions, if not billions, of mold spores there. And on the back side of that sheetrock is the actual colony with the roots, and it's going to be much worse, much bigger on the back side of that sheetrock than what you can see on the front of that. And so if you just bleach it, you'll take the color off the front, and it will look like everything's gone, but the back side of it is still going to be there and thriving. And so source removal is super important when it comes to mold. You want to cut it out and take it out and get rid of it. We don't like the word kill. We don't kill mold. We remove mold. Now, if it's on something glass, metal, plastic, some of those items, you might be able to take a damp cloth with like a Dawn dish soap or some kind of a, dish soap of some sort and wipe it away, because it's not penetrated into the surface, because those are not porous items. But sheetrock and wood and any porous item, you have to definitely do very different.
So it can grow on glass and plastic and everything else.
It
Okay.
can. It's usually on glass and plastic and that kind of stuff. It's usually growing on dust or a biofilm on top of it. And so that's very surface level. We'll see that a lot with high humidity. When the humidity is staying high for excessive periods of time, then sometimes we'll go into houses and mold will just be growing on everything.
Is it is it visible? Can I see it, or can it hide where I can't see it?
So that particular instance, you can see it, but most people don't know what they're looking for because a lot of times that mold is kind of a white, brownish, dusty looking color. It's not big and black. It doesn't look like what you think mold looks like. So mold comes in all sorts of different colors. It can come in everything from black to red to green to gray to brown to white. Like it's just any color you can almost think of mold can be. And different species can be different colors, at different times. And so the one that grows from high humidity, a lot that we see is a white color. And so a lot of people that happened to us in the basement that we were living or that was in the house we were in, and we thought it was dust. Like we had seen it. We thought it was dust, but it was not. It was mold.
Ah, I live on a dirt road. How would I tell?
You hire a
I
good
always
mold
have
inspector.
dust. How would I know?
Yeah, you
I
you
do. I
hire
live on a
us.
dirt road. Okay, so I live on a dirt road. I'm surrounded by trees. It's when it rains out here, it's wet for days because I am surrounded by oak trees.
Yeah.
And yeah, what are some things that we can do to prevent mold problems? Now I want to know.
Yeah, so the biggest thing that you can do to prevent mold is to prevent water damage and address it immediately. And so what we tell people is we're like sheetrock is cheap, mold inspections, remediation, and health is expensive. And so if your ceiling leaks and that water comes through that ceiling, don't dry it, cut it out, open it up immediately and cut it out because you can replace sheetrock for pretty cheap. But if you let it sit there for days, it can mold and it will usually like mold on the top side and you won't even know it. And so we say, when in doubt, cut it out. Like if it leaks, open it up, cut it out. If there's enough water that it goes from one room to another room, like the water heater busts and water travels, you need to open up, like cut the baseboards, cut the walls, get that open because what happens is the water gets trapped in between the wall, this side in that wall cavity. And you can dry, the outside, but you can't dry that inside. And some species of mold only need 24 hours to start growing. And so it can grow in those wall cavities with water very quickly. And so we say, when in doubt, cut it out. We have water alarms everywhere in our house where there's water. So behind the toilets, under the sinks, behind the washing machine, dishwasher, refrigerator, HVAC, water heater closet. They sell water alarms on Amazon for about $45. So they're relatively cheap, but they can save people thousands of dollars in remediation. We also have mats, like rubber mats with a little bit of a lip that we put under every sink and then put that water alarm on top of it. And that way, if it does leak, you have a little bit of time to get under there, get the water stopped, and get it cleaned up before it goes under the cabinet. Because usually, like under a kitchen sink, you don't see the mold. It's underneath that cabinet by the toe kick, and it's in an area that you visibly can't even get to without drilling a hole or opening up the toe kick. And so that's usually where it is. Mold likes to hide. It doesn't generally like to be out in the open. So those are some things that you can do. You can make sure you have good guttering, that you're keeping the guttering cleaned out so that it's not backing up. You can check your attic whenever it rains hard. That's a really good one. Make sure you're checking your water heater closet. Make sure you're checking your HVAC to make sure that it's doing well and not overflowing. Have your HVAC serviced regularly so someone's opening up and has eyes on that. If you have a call us. That's a whole nother story because crawl spaces tend to be pretty problematic. But yeah, there's a lot of things people can do. And again, we have a lot of recommendations that we try to share. We really try to educate people. We would love to put ourselves out of business. Going in moldy houses is not the safest thing in the world for us on a regular basis. And so if we could teach people to do all the preventative stuff where they never needed us, that would be wonderful. That would be amazing.
I feel a little better now. I have water alarms everywhere and none of them have gone
Good,
off. So I feel better now.
good.
What
One
do
more
we
thing I would
do?
say too is to monitor humidity. And if you're going out of town, don't turn your HVAC off. You need your humidity level in the house to be between 30 and 50%, but you definitely don't want to let the humidity get over 60. And they sell hygrometers back at Walmart by the light bulbs. They're around $10. And, just add 2 or 3 to your cart every time you go to Walmart and then have them in different rooms of the house. Also, using your exhaust fans when you cook and when you're taking a shower, super important. And if you like taking 50-minute steam showers, don't. Our bathrooms are not steam rooms.
So what should we do if we suspect we might have mold in our house?
So you can give us a call. We always talk to people, on the front end for free and go through a very lengthy intake process. If we don't think they have red flags, we'll be honest. We'll tell you on the front end, like, I don't think that it sounds like you have an issue. There's an at-home dust test called an ERMI through Envirobiomics, and a lot of times we'll send that to people if they don't have red flags, and that's a $280 test that they can do themselves. It's not 100%. It's definitely not going to tell you where the mold is. The scoring's not great, but there's some benefits to it because it will tell you historically what mold species have been floating through the air and settling in your dust. And we don't go off of the scoring necessarily, but if people, take that, it can help us know whether they have water damage molds in the house or whether their overall mold level is higher than it should be. There's always going to be some mold on the dust test because there's mold everywhere. There's mold outside all the time, all day, every day. Every time we walk outside, every time we open our windows, like there's some amount of mold. And that's okay. We have been able to live and coexist with mold for, thousands of years. However, we don't want it growing in our house. We don't want water damage and we don't want it growing in our house because that's when we get sick from it.
Are there warning signs that we should look for? Something we should, something
Yeah,
we should
I think
absolutely not ignore?
that smell, if you have a musty smell, that is a warning sign to do not ignore that. There is a problem. Something is not right. Something needs to be checked. Now, that doesn't always mean mold. There could be a sewer gas issue or different things like that. But that musty smell is absolutely a telltale sign. And then if people in the house are just chronically sick over and over and over and over, that's a really big telltale sign that you need to pay attention to. Don't just be like, well, I don't know. I guess the kids are just sickly. You know what I mean?
What's the most surprising thing you've ever encountered during an inspection?
We found some dead animals in some places.
Ew.
Hope has.
Ew.
Found a few dead rats and some dead squirrels and some different things. One time Hope tagged someone's walls in a couple areas, and when Blake drilled a hole in there, they found out that a squirrel or some animal, we assume it was a squirrel, was storing their winter nuts in the wall of the house.
Ew.
And that the squirrel had just put nuts like all throughout. It was an older house, but they were moldy, but that was a pretty interesting one. So we found some interesting things for sure. I did get into a drawer one time and pulled it out to look behind it, and it was a vacant house that was for sale, and someone had lost 2 wigs in the back of that drawer, and I thought it was a head. Scared me to death, but thank God it was not a head. It was wigs.
Have you ever walked into a house and just like you knew something was wrong before you even tested? You just walked in, you're like, yeah, we got a problem here.
We pull up in driveways sometimes, and I can smell the mold from outside the house sometimes.
Ugh.
It's that bad. There are homes that we don't take hope in. So I have been affected by mold, and we are very particular with our dog. We will not take her in homes where there's just like mold growing up the walls or it's really, really, really bad. And so we've gotten to a handful of houses before where Hope and I just left. Like we do an initial walkthrough. Blake and I go through the house to start with and check everything. We want to make sure there are no hazards before we take her in. And there have been a few that she and I just were like, I'm sorry, but we can't be in that house. She and I are going to have to leave. Blake's going to have to do this inspection on his own.
Okay, so we have to talk about Hope.
Yes.
What exactly is a mold detection dog?
Yeah. So just like any other detection dog, they can train dogs to sniff out pretty much any scent. And that's what, she does. And so the guy that trained her was training dogs for, police and military and all that for years. His daughter got Lyme disease, and he realized very quickly, being in Florida, that mold caused her Lyme to flare very bad. Those two do not play well together. And so he thought, hey, if I can train dogs to sniff out arson detection and, bombs and all these other things, I can train a dog for mold. And so he did. And so 30 years ago, he invented mold dogs, and he's been training them ever since. And so we took her down to Florida to Bill, and he trained her for about 5 months, 4 or 5 months. She was down there with him, and they cross train them on a variety of different molds. And so, just like with anything else, she knows the scent of that. And dogs' noses are so much stronger than ours, and they can detect just minute amounts of things. And so that's what she does. She just goes in those houses with us and helps us find where it's hidden.
How accurate is she?
She's very accurate. So she will actually tag things that don't have visible mold sometimes. And people will say, well, that's a false alert. But it's actually not, because mold is microscopic. Like I said, it may take tens of thousands or millions of spores to even be visible because it's so small. It's estimated that between like 3, I think, and 500 mold spores can fit on the head of a pin. That's how tiny they are. And so she'll tag things sometimes like antique furniture. And it's not because there's mold growing on it. It's because it sat in grandma's moldy basement for 50 years. And over 50 years, it has just absorbed mold spores and mycotoxins and the VOCs and all of that kind of stuff. And so she will tag things that are that minute sometimes. If someone is detoxing from mold and they are really sick, sometimes she'll tag their side of the bed. And so there are things that she'll tag that are just, it's amazing. And so then it's our job to check all of those areas and be like, okay, is this something that needs to be cleaned? Is this something that needs to be removed? Is this something that needs to be remediated? And so that's the reason having her with an inspector at the same time is so helpful. She'll also tag things sometimes that are high up. She's only 12 pounds. She's a tiny little thing, but mold spores may be coming down. Gravity will be pulling them down, maybe from a ceiling. And so sometimes we have to play a little bit of detective work to find out why she's tagging a certain area. But she's very, very accurate.
Do you have any stories where she found some mold that maybe people had no idea was there?
Yeah, I mean, all the time. So, we went in one particular house when we first got her, and it was out on the lake, and they had two properties that had been moved in and put together, basically. And she tagged an interior closet in the house, which we thought was very odd. But we didn't know the full, layout of how the house had been connected to the other house and everything. And so she tagged this closet, and Blake drilled a hole in and got back there and realized that behind that sheetrock was brick. And so when they had connected the two houses, they had left exterior brick on, put the new house on, and then just sheetrocked up against it. And so there was stachybotrys in that closet, and we would have never found it without her.
Okay. I'm just when they built the addition on my house, they did the same thing. The exterior wall of the original house is inside the addition. The siding, you can see the siding still there. So
might need to have hope out. Well, again, you don't know what you don't know until you know.
So if I bring her out to the house and she starts jumping up and down in my garage, I have a problem.
Probably. Yes.
Okie dokie then. Well, this has been fascinating. What's the one thing that you wish every homeowner owner understood about mold that most of us don't? I mean, I've learned a lot today. I'm seriously now going to be like, okay, I need to check out my house because I have some genuine possible concerns. So, what do you wish that we all understood that we probably don't?
I wish that people just understood that mold illness is much more common, and it needs to be fixed. The water damage and the mold in the house is a very important part of our health and needs to be addressed. Bleach is definitely not the answer. Painting over it, quilting it, any of that kind of stuff is definitely not the answer, but that it's fixable and that no one should be living with chronic health symptoms that no one can get to the answers to. There's a reason, and we would love to help them find that reason so that they can get back to having good health and living a good, happy, life and not being sick.
Sometimes now I'm sitting here thinking maybe I shouldn't have bought an older house. Maybe I should just demoed it and started from scratch. Oh well. Lindsay.
Well, I mean, new houses can have their problems too.
Yeah, well, older ones probably. Is that a case? Is it mostly older homes? My house is probably a good 35, 40 years old.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the older houses have more room to have had a history of water damage. So the older the home, a lot of times the more issues that we do find. And a lot of that is just because things have happened over the years and they've not been dealt with properly. They've been band-aided, painted over, patched over, quilted over, bleached over, sheetrocked over, whatever. But we do find issues in new builds as well because how quickly they're building houses these days and how complicated they are. So there can be older houses that work very, very well. I think a lot of the problem is when we take a very old house that was never designed to have plumbing or HVAC or heavy insulation, and we try to retrofit it to be something it was never designed to be. That can be problematic for sure.
Okay. Well, Lindsay, and of course, Hope, the mold dog. Thank you for coming on and sharing this with us. I mean, mold is just one of those things that people you don't think about until it becomes a problem.
Yeah.
And today's conversation just might help someone catch something before it gets that far. So if you think you might, if you're sitting here going like I have been listening to her I have potential problems. I need to go check. So if you're sitting here thinking, oh my gosh, I might have a mold problem, please reach out to Lindsay. I will put all of her contact information in the show notes. And of course, you'll get to meet Hope. And yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And if you know of someone that you think might benefit from from learning more about toxic mold and how we all know someone. We all know someone that has health problems. So if you're sitting here thinking, could it be mold? Please share this episode with them. And of course, subscribe to, subscribe to the podcast because these are just some of the things that we're going to be talking about in the future. So Lindsay, I thank you so much. And do we get to see Hope before we go?
Yeah, let me go grab her. Hold on just a second.
Okay. Oh, there's she. She's so cute.
This is how.
She's so cute.
Yeah, she's a tiny little thing.
Tiny but mighty.
Oh, she is. She has quite a personality too.
Well, Hope, I hope you know that you are a hero. Okay. So, how
She is.
adorable.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much. And we'll see. We'll see. We'll see. I might be calling you. We'll see.
Sounds good. All right. You have a good one. I'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.